So it's fantastic to see you. You know, I did my PhD on the same lab desk in the Cavendish as you did.
I know. It's quite a
there like a couple of weeks after you finished, and everybody told me, oh, you must meet Hermann, you must meet Hermann. But it took a long time. I think we met in London because we
yes,
are
indeed.
busy. Who was your supervisor in the Cavendish? A. Bioffi or?
John Field.
John Field, the yes. fast photography.
Yes, high-speed photography. And you?
First Ted Davis, you know.
Oh, yes.
And I was really, you know, when I went there, I was thinking to work with Mott, but then I found out that these two, you know, he had his last PhD student at that time. So Ted Davis, but Ted became a professor in Leicester like 3 months after I started. So then after that, it was Abe Bioffi.
Oh, Abe is just wonderful.
Oh, he's one of the best persons I've ever met.
Yeah, I think he's about to be 100, isn't he?
He's over 100, I think. I wanted to meet him, but I was told that he has one person from the Cavendish who meets him once a month or so, or once a week. I think he's doing well, I think, but he's you know, still.
He's getting old.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the main thing is really is now hot in the air is ARM, which you are both founder and godfather and investor and part owner, I guess, maybe. And so, I mean, you're one of the closest people to ARM from the beginning or before the beginning. So it would be very, very interesting to hear, because you also took a very public position now.
Yes, I have. I'm very worried about one of the very big American companies swallowing up ARM and destroying its business model, because ARM's business model, of course, is to be the Switzerland of the semiconductor industry.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Deal even-handedly with all the 500 licensees, many of which are competitors of Nvidia. So it would not be good for the ARM architecture.
Oh, yeah. Maybe you could also explain a bit about the history, you know, how you created ARM. I listened to your 3-hour interview in the Computer History Museum, so you don't need to repeat all the details because you already have done that. But just, you know, briefly, if you could survey, you know, sure. Remind us how you created ARM.
Yes. Well, ARM originally stood for the Acorn RISC machine.
Yes, yes.
We only later renamed it Advanced RISC Machine when we spun it out of Acorn with Apple. Mm-hmm. The origin of it is that the BBC microcomputer was based on an 8-bit processor called the 6502.
Yes.
And we needed, of course, more processing power for our next product. So
yes.
we looked at all the 16-bit and 32-bit microprocessors were on the market.
Yes.
And we quite liked the 8286. And we went to Intel and said, yes. Look, we like the chip, but you screwed out the pin out. You have both the address bus and the data bus on the same pins. Nobody can make a good computer out of that. But if you sell us just the die, maybe we can do our own pin out. Maybe we can make something of your chip. And they said, get lost, quite rightly so, because we're a smallish UK company. But we were quite arrogant at the time because we were very successful. So we said, you get lost, we'll do our own. So this is the only reason why the ARM exists. As luck will have it, John Hennessy and Patterson at Stanford and Berkeley.
He was the president of Stanford, I think, Hennessy, no?
Much later, yes. So John Hennessy became president of Stanford. And this RISC idea really was a revolution. It stands for reduced instruction set computer. And because the instruction set was reduced to such a small number, it was much easier to produce a microprocessor because the chip was so much smaller.
Sure.
And so a small team, like my brilliant team at Acorn, could do that. It's the only microprocessor in the world that has been designed by 2 people rather than 50 people, which is the normal number that you have in microprocessors design. And interestingly, the main advantage of the ARM, which in the end was the low power consumption, was not a design goal. It was a side effect of the fact that risk meant that we could make the chip very small.
Yes, and also I think you wanted to save on the packaging. I think you.
Oh yes, it had to be in a plastic package, and most processors at the time were in ceramic packages. But we needed a cheap one, so that was the only power constraint that we had.
I mean, the other thing which is also so interesting in what you said is that. I mean, today one of the beauties of ARM is the licensing model, and you said that came because Nokia refused to deal with with you, so you had to do it through Texas Instruments, which stimulated your creation of this licensing model.
Yes, as I wished I could claim that we dreamt up the licensing model. That was not the case. We were forced into it exactly the way you described it. That we were just too small a company to sell to Nokia, and Nokia really wanted our chip, so we had to license TI. And then, in fact, our first licensee was Plessey in the UK, and then TI, and then it snowballed from then. And now ARM is licensed to every single semiconductor company in the world.
Yeah. And you think that is going to change or that there's a risk that this is going to change because of political and also commercial issues now, which is your big campaign.
That's right. That's the big danger that Nvidia, which now has become the most valuable semiconductor company in the world, if they buy up ARM, which of course licenses many of their competitors, like Apple and Samsung and Huawei and all the mobile. ARM has a 95% market share in mobile phones, so most mobile phones use the ARM architecture. So this is one problem, that it would then be owned by one of the licensees, and the danger is it would not be so even-handed to all the other licensees. And the other worry that we have is that the US export regulations would then restrict the export of ARM licenses to countries like China. And this decision on whether to sell to China or any other country would be made in the White House rather than in Downing Street. And many people in the UK are unhappy about that.
I mean, one thing. I mean, I've been following that for a very, very long time, and you know, I tried to help Vodafone here, and there's really a long sequence of events. I mean, this sale of ARM to potential sale to Nvidia didn't drop out of the sky. I mean, there's a long string of events over the last 10 years, which led to this. And if you go back in history, then there was a time when Vodafone acquired a telecom operator here in Japan, which came out of the railways here. And it took Vodafone like 2 years to realize that what they had acquired is actually the biggest part of their company, you know, because the CEO at that time and the top management of Vodafone, they didn't study their geography, and they didn't realize how big Japan and their business they acquired in Japan is, and they weren't, well, they didn't understand what actually the business situation was, and there were soft problems, but then there were hard problems in that the telecom operators at that time, Docomo and KDDI, their competitors, they were investing about $2 billion a year or $3 billion a year in their infrastructure, whereas in UK or in Germany, at that time, the investment in the infrastructure of the telecom network was only 200 million. You know, it was a factor of 10 or 15 lower. And it took Vodafone at that time about 2 or 3 years until they realized that, you know, if they would have phoned me, I could have told them. And there were actually heated conversations on the phone where, you know, the Japanese Vodafone employee were trying to explain that to the British Vodafone employees and those or managers, and they screamed back, you know, they couldn't believe that. So If Vodafone would have won in Japan, that would be worth $80 billion now, you know,
Oh
which
my
is
goodness.
twice as big as all European investments in Japan, you know. So there's this order, there are huge orders of magnitude here, which I don't think people are aware. You know, so if Vodafone have won here in Japan, you know, SoftBank wouldn't be as big as it is today and wouldn't probably have been able to acquire ARM. But another question I have here, a question I have is, you know, when SoftBank acquired ARM at that time was on the London Stock Exchange. Yeah. My question to you is, why do you think is it that Masayoshi Son and SoftBank saw more value in ARM than the British financial community? Do you know what I mean? That's
well,
really the question. Sorry?
Because Masa-san at the time was enamored with the Internet of Things, and he realized that the ARM, of course, was the linchpin of all the Internet of Things, because 90% of the IoT devices in the world use ARM. And he was using that as a springboard to become a dominant IoT provider, which might still happen, but it takes a long time. A lot of investments have been made, but it hasn't paid off yet.
But why, I mean, at that point in time, I was really wondering why, you know, there's, you know, Britain is quite technology conscious. No? So, I mean, that's one of the points which maybe we can come to is your report on the Catapult centers, which is kind of your baby in a way, because I think it was done as a consequence of your first report, and then you followed with a second report. So in a way, you were emphasizing here that there should be more investment and more you know, facilities in technology, which is a bit related to this issue that ARM wasn't valued high enough in a way by the investment community.
Yes. Well, first a comment on the investment community. SoftBank,
which you are part of course.
Yes, indeed. So SoftBank paid a 43% premium on the market price.
Yes.
And I'm afraid the London financial community will take a 43% premium at any time, because they'd have to wait for a few years to...
well, they might even have a fiduciary committee to a commitment to obligation to do that.
Yes, yes. And I think that's the problem. That's why they all sold. So
the Catapult centers.
Yes. Well, the Catapult centers was a report that I was asked to write for Peter Mandelson at the business department. And I modeled it on the German Fraunhofer Gesellschaft.
Yes, yes, yes.
So a number of the key ingredients, like the financing, a third from industry, a third from government, and a third from competitive projects, I took over from the Fraunhofer, and that I think was a good decision. All the Fraunhofers are headed up by professors in Germany.
Yes.
And because many professors in Germany have a very strong industry relationship. Unfortunately, we couldn't find enough professors with very strong industry backgrounds in the UK. So we decided to have the heads of the Catapult centers to be industrialists, which has worked
all
very
of them,
well.
Or this is your suggestion, or that's the end result?
Yes, it was. And so over £1 billion has now been spent on, I think it's 12 Catapult centers all across the UK, and you know, I'm delighted that they're working so well.
Yeah, I'm one of the things I'm doing is building UK companies' business in Japan, and one of the companies I'm working with is actually originating from one of your Catapult centers. And at the moment we're a bit early, but later I can tell you which company that is. And
yes, I'd be delighted to hear that.
It's one, they are. I mean, they are very grateful to you also to to have helped these centers to come about. I have a little footnote there, which is not really, it's not really an important comment, but when I was reading your reports on which led to the Catapult centers, and later I think you made a survey report which surveyed how they have developed. No? And one of the things you mentioned there is, that's not really the key issue of your report, but it's like a side issue. No? You mentioned that these Catapult centers are very important for the competitiveness of the UK. And that made me think about quite a famous paper by Paul Krugman, you know, who's the Nobel Prize, one of the Nobel Prize winners in economy, who says, who wrote an article which is entitled "Competitiveness: A Dangerous Obsession." You know, and what he says in this report is that nations don't compete. You know, he says that nations should look to increase, you know, the revenue of people, you know, the income of salaries of people, you know, they should create high employment, make the community richer, you know. But he said you can rank nations, you know, you can say rank nations by GDP or so, but he says that while companies compete, you know, nations don't compete, he says. And he says it's even dangerous to think of that because it could lead to policy, you know, setting not optimal priorities in policies, you know. But of course, there are other economists now who argue against Krugman's comments, you know. So it's not really relevant to what you proposed for the for these centers. But what do you think about, you know, competitiveness and how about this Krugman's arguments about, you know,
well, you know, competition, of course, is a rather fundamental aspect of the way we organize our society. Yes, in a capitalist system, because the companies that are more efficient, of course, then manage to raise more capital, get more revenues, expand, they can pay better salaries for their staff. It's, but the basic starting point, which I think is very important to understand in any Western society, is the equal access to the market. It's the level playing field. So the only way you get the good companies to come to the top is if it's a level playing field, if everybody has got the same chance to succeed. So those people that organize themselves in a more efficient manner then become the winners in the marketplace. So I do think that competition is a very important part of the way we organize our economy.
That's true, yeah. So what you argued, what you just said is really against corruption in a way, no?
Absolutely, yes.
What you were just saying.
And against too much interference by the politicians.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. I won't name any countries, but, you know, I have looked at some startups in Europe, and then you have the local politicians in the board of directors and things like that, you know. And like in Cambridge, that, I mean, that's, I love Cambridge. I'm sure you love Cambridge as well. And I mean, one of the beauties of Cambridge is that the people in the local government would never demand seats on the boards of the companies in Cambridge. Now, I think that would kill the Cambridge, you know, the Cambridge ecosystem, wouldn't it? Or
yes, I agree with you. You don't want politicians to sit on the boards of companies.
There's one, could you tell more about Amadeus Capital, which you founded? And also I mean, which is at the center of the Cambridge ecosystem. Of course, also about the Cambridge ecosystem, which is, you know, many people will say it's one of the top 3 university-based ecosystems in the world. And in Europe, it has certainly been the first one. And it's also the reason why I went the second time. You know, I went 2 times to Cambridge, once for my PhD, and then I got this Trinity fellowship, and some of that I spent in Germany and Japan, but then I went a second time. as a tenured lecturer in the Cavendish. So, and one of the reasons to go there was this Cambridge ecosystem, for which you were one of the core creators. So maybe you can tell a bit about that. And also because, you know, initially I contacted you for Trinity College. If you could say a bit about your interactions with the Trinity Science Park, that would be also interesting.
Yes, no, I'd be very happy to talk about the Cambridge phenomenon, so-called. We now have some 6,000 high technology companies.
How many? 6,000?
It's now up to 6,000. It's unbelievable. And
I knew it was many, but I didn't know it's so many.
Yes, yes, it is 6,000. And we now have 17 unicorns.
And you are investor in most of them, or?
No, just 7 of them.
Well, that's half almost.
Yes, and ARM, of course, is worth 40 billion.
Yes,
that's what Nvidia is bidding for it at the moment. And Solexa, which was sold to Nvidia and is now responsible for 3/4 of the Nvidia revenue, that also is a $40 billion company. So I feel that I have 2 decacorns to put my name to, which of course I'm very proud of. Yes. And the reason why the Cambridge phenomenon has worked so well has a lot to do with the local culture of that is very supportive of. It actually comes from the university culture.
Yes, yes.
Which is very supportive of its students, very supportive of the spin-outs. So it's almost like a family. You know, you want these young companies to succeed, and therefore there's a lot of support from the university. There's a lot of support from the local ecosystem, and a lot of support from local venture capitalists like Amadeus Capital Partners. So, you know, we're one of the main funders of the Cambridge phenomenon, of course.
Oh yeah. And did you have much interaction with the Trinity Science Park?
Yes.
What role does the Trinity Science Park have in Cambridge? Yes. I mean, it was one of the first, no? So it was kind of part of the kickoff. And
yes.
John Bradfield, I still remember him. He gave me a lot of like grandfatherly advice. He was a wonderful man.
Well, he was a wonderful man. And as you say, of course, the sponsor of the Trinity Science Park, and a number of my companies are based on the Science Park. And of course, the first tenant of the Trinity Science Park was Cambridge Consultants. And I've done a number of successful companies with CCL, like the Bluetooth company, the Cambridge Silicon Radio, CSR, which was sold to Qualcomm for $3 billion. Plastic Logic was on the Science Park, and lots of others.
And I heard, I think you said in your interview that recently you are attending lectures in biochemistry and molecular biology. And so how much of your percentage of your kind of activities is now in molecular biology, where Cambridge is, of course, again, you know, they get a Nobel Prize almost every year now in this the bio field.
Yes, Cambridge does. Well, this was really a result of the phenomenal success of Solexa, the gene sequencing company. That was a technical breakthrough.
Yes, I heard your talk on YouTube. It's amazing. It's fantastic.
Yes, and 90% of the gene sequencing in the world is now done on our machines. They're still all developed in Cambridge, although it's owned by an American company called Illumina. Okay. It's all Cambridge technology. And this impressed me so much because I've lived off Moore's law all my life. And there we took a very important development, which is gene sequencing. And we managed to reduce the cost of gene sequencing from $10 million to $1,000 in the space of less than 10 years. So, you know, the Moore's law is a factor of 32 a decade. This was a factor of 10,000. So I thought this was unbelievable and was keen to find out more. and that's what made me go back to our lectures in biochemistry.
Oh, yeah.
And I now do more life science deals than ICT deals.
Oh, yeah. The last, for our Trinity in Japan meetings here, the last interview discussion we had was with Venki Ramakrishnan, who is just amazing. He's a genius, just amazing. Maybe one thing I can still ask you is, some of the people who listen to you here now, when they listen to this on YouTube, they might think that they will have the next unicorn in the making. So if they want to contact you, what should they tell you? What are you looking for so that you get interested? I mean, you must have many people must ask you with proposals.
Yes, I look at a couple of proposals every day. So
really?
yes, I've got a fantastic deal flow. So there are three things that I'm looking for. One is the size and growth rate of the market. Two is the quality of the team, and in this order. The size of the market is more important because the market isn't big enough. Why bother do it?
Yes.
And sadly, for a propeller head like me, technology comes third, because I've had so many examples of an A team with C technology beating the C team with an A technology every time.
Okay. Yeah, in one of the videos I've heard with you is you say that in your case, in the cases you've actually invested, in most cases, the technology is not the problem. You said that mostly the technology works.
Yes, this is true for ICT. It's not necessarily true for life sciences, but for ICT, the technology typically works. Now, it doesn't always work quite as fast as you want it to work. And it doesn't often work quite as well as you want it. But out of the 100 investments I've made in ICT, there's only been one single investment where the technology didn't work at all.
Oh, really?
A company called Polite.
And they didn't check it out before they came to you? Or?
Well, they did, and we'd also did the due diligence, but it was
too optimistic. Or?
It was a fiendishly complex optical company. We're using chalcogenides, and we were hoping that because chalcogenides
for solar cells are
very high Chi2s, and we were hoping to use chalcogenides for worm disks. Once.
Or for memories, yeah.
Right once only. But the material properties just weren't good enough to translate it into a successful company.
And how do you see the future of Cambridge now?
Well, we're in an absolutely exponential growth phase at the moment. Lots of things are combining to make Cambridge really a very efficient ecosystem now. We've had a huge cultural change. So the thing that just happened over the last few years is, for the first time, the very best students that used to make a beeline to the city or to the big consultancy companies like KPMG, etc., are now considering doing startups, because that's a cool thing to do. And, they get credibility from their peer groups, so they don't have to go to the big banks or the big consultancy companies. They get a lot of kudos by starting a company as well. And that's a very important cultural change.
That's, I was director of studies in Trinity, so I was responsible for, I forgot now, 24 students. And when they arrived, I always asked them, what do you want to do in the future? No? And maybe 2/3 wanted to go to the city. They studied natural sciences. Cambridge doesn't accept physics, but you do natural sciences. No? Yeah. And maybe 2/3 wanted to go into the city. So, I'm a physicist, so they came to me and they wanted to do 3 years physics to go into the city, But now,
it's very sad.
Last year I organized here for 21 Cavendish PhD students to come here in Tokyo, and I organized a meeting for them to meet Japanese companies, and most of them, they came with plans to start companies, most of them.
Well, isn't that nice to hear? I'm so pleased you say that.
That's exactly what I think you are behind that also as a role model. And
well, thank you very much. So it's very kind of you to say so.
But that's crucial, no? I think you need you need that as a you need the big kind of polar star to aim for.
Well, it's a very kind metaphor.
Thank you so much. I don't want to take too much of your time now. This was
really, really. It's been a real pleasure. It's so nice to talk to you again and see you. And congratulations on your fantastic career in Japan.
Yeah, I wish I could do. I mean, I'm helping a British company now. So once it's a bit further, then I can tell you which one it is, and you may know them.
Please do. We'd love to look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you again soon.
Yes, all the best.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.